Imagine this: your child, your friend, or someone you've known your whole life goes on a trip to celebrate the end of school, a trip they've looked forward to for months. They're happy, surrounded by friends, excited for the future. But then, the unthinkable happens. What if they simply vanished? No goodbye, no warning, just gone. How would you feel if someone you loved disappeared into thin air and you were left with only questions? This is the story of Natalee Holloway. She was 18, fresh out of high school, ready to begin the next chapter of her life. She had a bright future, a loving family, and big dreams. Her trip to Aruba was supposed to be the start of a summer filled with memories and laughter. But in one night, everything changed. Natalee went out with friends, enjoyed the last night of her vacation, and was expected to fly home the next day. But by morning, she was nowhere to be found. How could this happen? How does a young woman, surrounded by her friends on a small island, disappear without a trace? What happened in those final hours of that night? Who saw her last? Who holds the key to the answers her family still searches for? As the days passed, Natalee's parents rushed to Aruba, desperate to find her. Search teams scoured the beaches, helicopters flew over the island, divers explored the ocean, but there was no sign of her. The island, once seen as a paradise, became a place of questions and mysteries. Every moment that passed felt like a clue slipping away, and every answer they thought they found led only to more confusion. People began to talk. They said she had been seen leaving a nightclub with 3 young men. They talked about confessions, stories that changed, and secrets that seemed buried too deep. Investigators faced a puzzle with missing pieces, a web of stories that seemed to twist and turn. Natalee's family held on to hope, listening to every word, searching for something that could explain how their daughter, a young girl with so much life ahead, could vanish like this. This story isn't just about Natalee's disappearance, it's about the tireless search that followed, a family who refused to give up, and the haunting question of how someone could disappear in a place so open, so full of people, with no one knowing the truth. In the years that followed, Natalee's story became known worldwide. It exposed secrets, brought suspects forward, and kept everyone guessing. Each new lead brought hope, but also heartbreak, as answers seemed always just out of reach. Her parents fought to keep the search alive, to find some way to bring their daughter back home, but the mystery only grew. Who were the people with her that night? Why did their stories change? And what were they hiding? This is Natalee Holloway's story, a story of a young life taken too soon, a paradise turned to pain, and a mystery that refuses to fade. It is the story of a family's fight for answers, of a community shaken by loss, and of a world that has never stopped asking, what happened to Natalee? Because somewhere someone knows, and until the truth is uncovered, this story will not rest. Before the world knew her name, before she became the center of a mystery, Natalee Holloway was simply Natalee, a daughter, a friend, a classmate. She grew up in the close-knit community of Mountain Brook, Alabama, where everyone knew each other and friendships ran deep. Mountain Brook is a place where families stay close, where neighbors look out for one another, and where young dreams are nurtured. This is where Natalee's life was rooted, surrounded by people who cared about her. Natalee was raised by her mother, Beth, who worked tirelessly to give her children a stable and loving home. Beth describes Natalee as more than a daughter. She was her friend, her confidante, her partner in everything. Natalee was the type of girl who made others feel comfortable. She was open-hearted, easy to talk to, and always willing to lend a hand. People remember her smile, her laugh, and the way she could brighten a room just by walking in. At school, Natalee stood out not just for her grades, but for her character. She was smart, dedicated, and had a natural curiosity that drove her to excel. Teachers describe her as a model student, someone who worked hard and cared deeply about her future. Natalee's classmates saw her as the friend they could always count on, the one who would be there no matter what. She was the friend who remembered birthdays, who showed up when you needed support, and who always knew how to make you feel special. As graduation approached, Natalee was more than just excited, she was ready. Ready to take on new challenges, ready to explore, and ready to experience life beyond the familiar streets of Mountain Brook. She had been accepted to the University of Alabama, a place where she would continue her studies and start the journey toward her dreams. She wanted to study pre-med, hoping to one day work in healthcare and help people, just as she had always helped her friends and family. She had plans, she had dreams, and she was determined to make them come true. And like many graduating seniors, Natalee looked forward to the traditional graduation trip. This was her chance to celebrate years of hard work, to let go of the stress, and to enjoy her last days as a high schooler with the friends who had been by her side all these years. The trip to Aruba was a big deal, a milestone that marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. She and her classmates had been talking about it for months, counting down the days, planning every moment, and imagining the memories they would make together. For Natalee, this trip was more than just a vacation. It was a celebration of everything she had accomplished and a chance to relax before diving into the next phase of her life. Natalee was thrilled. Her mother, Beth, felt a mixture of pride and the natural worry that any mother would feel. Beth trusted her daughter and knew that Natalee was responsible. She was comforted by the fact that Natalee would be surrounded by friends and chaperones, people she could trust. The thought of letting her go was bittersweet, but Beth wanted her daughter to experience life, to have those moments of joy and freedom. So, with a heart full of hope, she watched Natalee board the plane, expecting her to return with stories of adventure and laughter. For Natalee, Aruba was supposed to be a week of sunshine, fun and friendship. It was a well-deserved break after years of studying, exams, and the pressures of high school life. She had big plans for the summer after graduation, plans to spend time with family, prepare for college, and savor these last few months at home before starting a new journey. She was ready to embrace the future, filled with dreams and determination, with the confidence that life had so much to offer. But as we know, that future, those dreams, and that determination would all come to a sudden stop. In a place she hoped would bring joy and memories, Natalee would face an unthinkable fate, one that her family, her friends, and her community could never have imagined. Because this trip to Aruba, meant to be a simple celebration, would become the beginning of one of the greatest mysteries of our time. For Natalee Holloway and her friends, the graduation trip to Aruba was the event they had been talking about all year. After the stress of final exams and the emotions of graduation, this was their chance to finally unwind. The excitement was contagious as they boarded the plane, laughing, snapping pictures, and thinking of the days of sunshine and freedom that lay ahead. This was more than just a vacation, it was a reward, a shared experience that each of them would carry with them for years to come. For many of them, it was their first real taste of independence, a brief glimpse of adulthood before the responsibilities of college life began. Natalee was there with over 100 classmates, friends who had been part of her life for years. These were the people she'd grown up with, the people who knew her best, and they were ready to make memories together on an island they'd only dreamed about. With 7 adult chaperones along, their families back home felt confident that the group would be well looked after. They imagined their sons and daughters coming back with stories of snorkeling, beach bonfires, and exploring new places. Aruba, with its white sandy beaches and clear turquoise waters, seemed like the perfect destination. It was a paradise in every sense of the word. Known for its friendly locals, its vibrant nightlife, and its welcoming atmosphere, Aruba had earned a reputation as a safe, beautiful place for tourists. Families came for the beaches, and young people came for the adventure. The small island was a mix of cultures, with Dutch, Caribbean, and Latin American influences that gave it a unique charm. Tourists filled the markets, the beaches, and the nightlife spots, creating a buzzing, lively energy that seemed to fill every corner. For Natalee and her friends, the days were filled with endless options, lounging on the beach, trying new foods, and exploring the island. Some days were spent snorkeling, others walking through the colorful local markets, laughing as they bargained for souvenirs. As each day went by, they grew more comfortable, more confident in their new surroundings. They shared meals, told stories, and celebrated their freedom, their hearts light with the knowledge that these were the moments they would remember long after high school was over. And when the sun set, Aruba transformed into a new kind of paradise. Music filled the air as the island's nightlife came alive, drawing locals and tourists alike. The streets of Oranjestad, the capital, were filled with the hum of laughter and excitement, and the young graduates were eager to experience it all. Bars and clubs opened their doors, welcoming the crowds, and the sounds of music drifted through the air, mixing with the scent of salt and tropical flowers. It was here, amid the lights and laughter, that Natalee and her friends found themselves on their last night on the island. The night started like any other, friends gathering together, sharing plans for the evening, excited for their final night in paradise. The group decided to head to Carlos and Charlie's, a well-known spot in Oranjestad where locals and tourists mingled. Carlos and Charlie's was lively and fun, a place where people danced, laughed, and enjoyed the last hours of the night. For Natalee and her friends, it was one last celebration before returning home. The club was packed, filled with people of all ages, drawn to the music, the energy, and the feeling that this night was one to be savored. The friends stuck together as they danced, shared drinks, and took pictures to remember this final night. Natalee, like the others, was enjoying every moment. She was surrounded by her friends, her laughter blending into the noise of the crowd, her smile a reflection of the happiness and freedom they all felt. For a group of teenagers, the night felt safe, carefree, and full of promise. They didn't think about tomorrow's flight or the goodbyes that would come too soon. In those hours, they were fully present, living each moment to the fullest. As the night wore on, Natalee met Joran van der Sloot, a young Dutch man who was a familiar face around the club scene in Aruba. Joran was tall, charming, and friendly, and he quickly joined Natalee and her friends. Alongside Joran were his friends Deepak and Satish Kalpo, two local brothers, who, like Joran, often spent time in Oranjestad's nightlife spots. To Natalee and her friends, these young men seemed like just another part of the friendly crowd, locals who were part of the island's welcoming culture. The night continued, with laughter, conversations, and the easy joy of young people enjoying their last moments together in paradise. By the end of the evening, as the clock neared closing time, Natalee was seen leaving Carlos and Charlie's with Joran and the Kalpo brothers. They climbed into Deepak's car, a silver Honda, as they said goodbye to the lights and noise of the club and drove into the warm Aruba night. For her friends still in the club, the night continued, unaware that this would be the last time they would see Natalee. They assumed she would be back soon, that she'd be there in the morning, ready to share stories and catch their flight back home. There was no reason to worry, no reason to think that anything could go wrong on an island that felt so safe. But as the hours ticked by and morning came, Natalee wasn't there. She wasn't in her room, she wasn't with her friends, and no one knew where she had gone. The excitement of the last night quickly turned to confusion, and then to worry. They searched, asked around, and checked every corner of the hotel, but Natalee was nowhere to be found. What started as a carefree celebration was now a frantic search, as her friends realized that Natalee, the girl they thought would be by their side on the flight home, was missing. And as the day went on, their worry grew, slowly turning into a fear they had never imagined would touch their lives. This was supposed to be their last day on the island, a day spent packing and sharing memories before boarding their flight back home. But for Natalee's friends and family, the dream of this trip had turned into a nightmare, one that would only deepen as the search for Natalee began, and the mystery of her disappearance started to unfold. It was May 29th, 2005, the last night of Natalee's trip to Aruba, a night meant to be a celebration of friendship, of memories, and of the joy that only comes with knowing you've completed one of life's biggest milestones. For Natalee and her friends, Carlos and Charlie's was the place to be. It was their final night on the island, and this vibrant nightclub had become the center of their celebration. Carlos and Charlie's was famous among tourists, a place where travelers came to enjoy the music, the energy, and the carefree vibe of Aruba's nightlife. On any given night, the club was packed with people from all over the world, blending locals and tourists in one lively mix. That night, the lights were bright, the music was loud, and the dance floor was packed. There was a shared excitement in the air, as everyone seemed to feel the same thrill, that electricity of the night, especially for Natalee and her friends, who were making the most of these final hours on the island. Natalee was surrounded by her friends, laughing, dancing, and fully present in each moment. She was celebrating, enjoying the freedom, the warmth of the night, and the sense that this was their last hurrah before heading home. The friends shared rounds of drinks, clinked glasses, took photos, and embraced each other with that bittersweet feeling of endings and new beginnings. They knew that once they boarded the plane back home, everything would be different. College awaited them, with new challenges, new experiences, and the start of their adult lives. During the night, Natalee's group wasn't the only one enjoying the crowd at Carlos and Charlie's. Among the bustling crowd of locals and tourists was a young Dutch man named Joran van der Sloot, who was a familiar face around the nightlife spots of Aruba. Joran was only 17, but his height, his confidence, and his friendly nature often allowed him to blend seamlessly with the older crowd. Known by locals and other tourists, Joran was at ease in places like Carlos and Charlie's, where he spent many evenings with his friends Deepak and Satish Kalpo, two local brothers. Somewhere in the course of the night, Natalee met Joran and his friends. There was nothing unusual about their interaction. Joran was friendly, and Natalee, enjoying the open and social atmosphere of the club, seemed to welcome the company. Conversations flowed easily, And for Natalee and her friends, this was just another chance to make the night even more memorable. People came and went, groups mingled, and introductions were made. It was a setting where everyone felt safe, where strangers became friends over shared laughter and stories. As the night went on, Natalee's friends continued to dance, taking in every last second of their final hours in Aruba. But eventually, the crowd began to thin out, and people started to make their way back to their hotels. The music was still playing, the lights were still flashing, but the hours had stretched late, and one by one, Natalee's classmates prepared to leave. Some said goodnight, others lingered for one last dance, but the energy in the room was finally starting to wind down. It was that familiar moment at the end of a night when people begin to feel the pull of sleep and the thought of the day ahead. Around 1:30 a.m., Natalee was seen leaving Carlos and Charlie's with Joran van der Sloot, accompanied by Deepak and Satish. The four of them stepped out of the club together, the warm night air replacing the noise and lights of the club. Witnesses recall seeing Natalee smiling and talking as they walked toward Deepak's silver Honda. She was with people she had just met, but in an island setting that felt so safe, there was no reason for alarm. To anyone watching, it seemed like the end of a good night, a young woman making her way back after a memorable evening. As they drove off, the streets were quiet, the nightlife settling down for the night. What conversations took place in the car? What were her last thoughts as she left Carlos and Charlie's? Those are questions that may never be fully answered. But in those moments, the joyful, carefree energy of the evening began to fade, replaced with a silence that would soon lead to worry, confusion, and dread. Back at the hotel, Natalee's friends assumed she would return soon. They expected her to walk in with a smile, maybe with stories to tell, maybe just ready to get some sleep before their flight home. As the hours ticked by, they waited, glancing at the clock, thinking she would appear at any moment. But as dawn approached, and there was still no sign of Natalee, the unease began to grow. What was meant to be a fun, harmless night out had taken a turn no one expected. By morning, the realization hit hard. Natalee wasn't coming back to her room, and no one knew where she was. What happened after she left the club? What conversations, what moments occurred in the early hours as she left with those three young men? And how, in such a small place, could someone disappear without a trace? This was supposed to be a night Natalee and her friends would remember for its laughter, its freedom, and the joy of friendship. Instead, it became a night that left a question mark that has haunted everyone who knew her, a night that turned from celebration to mystery in the blink of an eye. It was a quiet morning at the Holiday Inn in Aruba. The sun had just started to rise, casting gentle light across the rooms where Natalee's friends were slowly waking up, gathering their things and getting ready to head home. Bags were packed, graduation souvenirs stowed away, and travel plans confirmed. The excitement of the previous night was now replaced by the routine of departure day, the last goodbyes, the last looks around, and the thoughts of heading back to Alabama, to family and familiar surroundings. But as friends began to gather, there was one person missing. Natalee Holloway had not returned to her room. At first, her absence didn't raise immediate alarm. Maybe she was still asleep in another room. Maybe she had gone for an early walk along the beach. But as minutes turned into an hour and still there was no sign of Natalee, a quiet concern began to spread. Friends knocked on doors, checked the hotel lobby, and scanned the beach for any sign of her. But Natalee was nowhere to be found. As they continued to search, the worry grew stronger, turning into a nervous energy that rippled through the group. Natalee's friends tried to call her, but her phone went unanswered. They retraced their steps from the night before, asking each other if anyone had seen her after she left Carlos and Charlie's. But no one knew where she was, and no one had seen her since she'd driven off with Joran van der Sloot and the Calpo brothers. As word spread among the group, the chaperones were alerted. These were adults who had known Natalee and her classmates for years, teachers and mentors who were there to ensure their safety and guide them on this trip. But now, they were faced with a situation they had never imagined. One of their students was missing, and they had no idea where to start looking. The first calls went out to the hotel staff, to local police, and finally to Natalee's family. Back in Alabama, Beth Holloway received a call no mother should ever have to hear. Her daughter was missing. The panic, the disbelief, the shock of it all set in like a sudden weight, and within hours, Beth was on a plane to Aruba, determined to find her daughter and bring her home. For Beth, the flight felt like an eternity. Every mile brought her closer to the unknown, closer to the nightmare she could hardly process. She clung to hope, telling herself that Natalee was safe, that maybe there had been a misunderstanding, that any moment she would hear her daughter's voice and know it had all been a mistake. But as the plane touched down and she arrived at the hotel to find Natalee's friends anxiously waiting, reality sank in. Natalee was still missing, and no one had answers. Beth wasted no time. She began asking questions, retracing her daughter's steps, and speaking to everyone who might have seen her. She looked into the eyes of each of her daughter's friends, searching for anything, any small detail that might explain where Natalee could be. But all she got were blank stares and the same haunting words, "We don't know." The initial searches began quickly. Local police were called in, as well as volunteers who spread out across the island, searching every corner of the hotel, the beaches, and nearby areas. They asked around, hoping someone had seen Natalee in the early hours of the morning. Flyers were printed with her photo, and people stopped strangers on the street, holding up her picture, asking if anyone had seen this young woman. For Beth, the island that had once seemed like paradise was now a maze of unanswered questions, every street and building a reminder that her daughter was out there, somewhere. In those first frantic hours, the search focused on every possible place Natalee could be, the hotel grounds, nearby bars, alleys, and beaches. Beth and the others couldn't believe how quickly their hope was slipping into fear. Each hour that passed felt like an eternity, a cruel reminder that Natalee hadn't come back. Her friends and family held on to every bit of hope they could muster. But with each passing minute, they found it harder to ignore the gnawing dread growing in their hearts. The word of Natalee's disappearance began to spread, reaching local news stations and then quickly catching the attention of international media. What had started as a quiet search among friends and family now became a public call for help. Reporters gathered, news trucks lined the streets, and Aruba, known for its beaches and tranquility, became the focus of a global story. But as the sun set on that first day, there were still no answers, and Natalee was still missing. Beth felt the exhaustion and despair settling in, but she refused to rest, refused to let herself consider anything other than finding her daughter. She had come to this island to bring Natalee home, and she would not leave until she did. That first night, Beth and her supporters held on to each other, sharing stories, memories, and fears. As they watched the sun sink below the horizon, they could only pray that tomorrow would bring a lead, a clue, some piece of information that would bring Natalee back to them. The search had only just begun, but the weight of it was already crushing. The questions loomed over them like a dark cloud. Where was Natalee, and how could she simply disappear? They did not know it then, but this search would stretch on, leading them through twists and turns they could never have expected. And in those quiet, desperate moments, they clung to one thing: hope, the small but unwavering belief that Natalee was out there somewhere, waiting to be found. As the hours turned into days, the search for Natalee Holloway intensified. What started as a small, desperate effort by friends and family soon grew into a large-scale operation involving the entire island. The beaches of Aruba, once peaceful and quiet, were now filled with volunteers, search teams, and local residents who had come together, united in one mission: to find Natalee and bring her home. Every morning, search teams arrived before sunrise, ready to comb through every inch of the island. They walked the beaches, carefully scanning the sand, hoping to find anything: a footprint, a piece of jewelry, some small sign that might point them in the right direction. The ocean, vast and mysterious, became a focal point of the search. Divers entered the water day after day, exploring the coastline and looking for clues beneath the surface. It was an exhausting, physically demanding task, but the divers pushed on, driven by the hope that they could provide answers for a family desperate to know what had happened. The currents were strong, the visibility low, and the ocean held its secrets tightly. But still, they continued, their determination unwavering as they searched the waters surrounding Aruba. Inland, the search spread to fields, abandoned buildings, and remote areas rarely visited by tourists. Volunteers walked in lines, their eyes scanning the ground, their minds focused on finding any possible clue. They knew that time was crucial. Every passing hour made the search more difficult. And yet, as the days wore on and the summer heat intensified, they did not give up. People who had never met Natalee, people who did not know her family, dedicated their time and energy to finding her. Aruba was no longer just a vacation spot. It had become a community united by hope, compassion, and a fierce determination to bring Natalee home. The story quickly spread beyond Aruba's shores, capturing the attention of the global media. News of Natalee's disappearance reached televisions, newspapers, and online platforms around the world, turning a small Caribbean island into the center of an international mystery. Reporters from every major network arrived, setting up cameras along the beaches, interviewing locals, and broadcasting updates as the search continued. The faces of Natalee and her mother, Beth, became known to millions who watched the story unfold from thousands of miles away. It was as if the world had paused to witness this tragedy, each person hoping for a different outcome, each person gripped by the same question: where was Natalee? The media presence was both a blessing and a burden. On one hand, it brought attention, resources, and pressure that kept the search active. With cameras rolling and headlines circulating, the urgency of Natalee's case could not be ignored. Law enforcement felt the weight of the world watching, and they intensified their efforts, knowing that the public was demanding answers. Private investigators joined the case, bringing in their own teams, their own methods, and their own hope that they could find the piece of information that would break the case open. But with this attention also came challenges. Reporters followed every step, every lead, sometimes creating confusion or spreading rumors that would later prove false. In the rush to uncover the truth, details were sometimes exaggerated, and each new theory became a headline, adding layers of complexity to an already overwhelming situation. The media turned the story into a spectacle, and with each passing day, new theories and stories began to surface, each one pulling the focus in a different direction. As the investigation continued, key figures emerged, people who had the experience, resources, and knowledge to guide the search efforts. The Aruban police, working closely with American officials, took charge of the formal investigation, interviewing witnesses, tracking leads, and piecing together the events of Natalee's last known moments. Their job was daunting. They were up against time, uncertainty, and the challenge of managing an international case under the scrutiny of a worldwide audience. Private investigators, hired by Beth Holloway and other supporters, brought their expertise as well. These were men and women with years of experience, skilled in finding answers where others saw only questions. They worked tirelessly, sometimes clashing with local authorities, sometimes bringing forward leads that seemed promising, only to end in dead ends. But no matter how frustrating the process became, they continued, fueled by Beth's determination and the global call for justice. And through it all, Beth Holloway remained a constant presence, a mother who refused to rest, who refused to leave the island until she had answers. She met with law enforcement, private investigators, and media outlets, sharing her story, her heartbreak, and her plea for help. Her strength became a symbol for others, a reminder that no matter how difficult the journey, she would not give up on finding her daughter. Beth's face, filled with exhaustion but unwavering in determination, became an image that resonated with people around the world, a face that said she would not stop searching until she had answers. Each day, the search expanded. The beaches, the water, the streets of Orangestad, the rocky cliffs, every part of the island was combed again and again. Volunteers returned day after day, each hoping that this would be the day they found something, anything, that would bring an end to the nightmare. Helicopters flew overhead, scanning the coastline and providing aerial views of areas difficult to reach on foot. Sniffer dogs were brought in, their handlers guiding them through rough terrain, hoping that the dogs' keen senses would pick up on something the human eye could not see. And still, the days passed, and there were no answers. The hope that had fueled the initial search began to wane, replaced by a deep, aching despair. People started to wonder, how could a young woman disappear so completely on an island filled with people, with search teams, with the media watching every step? How could there be no trace, no evidence, no answers? The island, once seen as a beautiful paradise, now held an air of mystery and sadness, a place where one family's joy had turned to unimaginable sorrow. Yet despite the lack of progress, Beth and the search teams pressed on. Every sunrise was a new chance, every wave a reminder of the vastness of the unknown. They held on to hope, refusing to let go, refusing to believe that Natalee was gone forever. In those long days, the search was not just a physical effort, it was a test of faith, of resilience, of the human will to find closure in a world filled with uncertainty. As the world watched, the search for Natalee became more than just a local investigation. It became a symbol of a community's compassion, of a mother's love, and of a mystery that seemed impossible to solve. The island had changed. Aruba was no longer just a tourist destination. It was now the heart of a story that would touch lives across continents, a place that held secrets no one could yet understand. This was no longer just a search for Natalee. It was a search for truth, for justice, for the one piece of evidence that would answer the question haunting everyone's minds. The world had come together to find her, and until they had answers, they would not rest. But as the days turned into weeks and the leads grew thin, The hope that had once driven them forward began to feel fragile, like something that could slip away at any moment. And in those moments, they realized the weight of this journey, a journey that would test them in ways they had never imagined. As the search continued, attention soon turned to the last people seen with Natalee Holloway, Joran van der Sloot, and the Kalpoe brothers, Deepak and Satish. They were the last link to Natalee's final known moments, the last ones to have any idea of where she might have gone. From the beginning, their stories drew scrutiny and suspicion. Joran, a 17-year-old Dutch national, had been living in Aruba with his family. Though known for his tall frame and easygoing charm, he was a familiar face in Oranjestad's nightlife scene, where he and his friends, the Kalpoe brothers, were often seen at clubs. In Aruba's tight-knit social circles, locals and tourists alike knew Joran and his friends as regulars. They were part of the night crowd, blending in with the tourists who came to enjoy the island's carefree atmosphere. But when Natalee disappeared, that carefree image began to crumble. Initially, Joran and the Kalpoe brothers claimed that they had simply given Natalee a ride and dropped her off at her hotel after leaving Carlos and Charlie's. According to their story, they had all been laughing and talking during the drive, and when they arrived at the hotel, Natalee got out on her own, walked toward the lobby, and that was the last they saw of her. It seemed like a harmless encounter, just a friendly gesture toward a tourist enjoying her last night on the island. But as investigators dug deeper, they began to see cracks in this story. Police soon discovered discrepancies in the timeline and the details provided by Joran and the Kalpoes. Witnesses had seen Natalee leaving the club with them, but no one could confirm seeing her return to the hotel. Surveillance footage from the hotel lobby did not show Natalee entering at the time Joran and the brothers claimed to have dropped her off. This missing footage raised questions. If Natalee didn't return to her hotel, then where had she gone? And why would Joran and his friends say they dropped her off if they hadn't? As the inconsistencies became more apparent, Joran's story began to shift. Under questioning, he offered a second version of events, saying that he had left Natalee alone on the beach after they talked for a while. He claimed that Natalee wanted to stay by the water, so he decided to leave her there, thinking she would eventually return to her hotel on her own. This new story only deepened the mystery. If he had left her alone on the beach, why hadn't she returned? And if she was truly alone, then what happened in those minutes or hours that followed? The Kalpoe brothers also struggled to keep their stories consistent. Deepak and Satish initially backed up Joran's version, but as the pressure mounted, they began to change their accounts, pointing fingers at each other and at Joran. The once solid front they had presented started to splinter, each of them offering slightly different details about what had happened that night. These contradictions fueled even more suspicion and confusion, and investigators began to suspect that something far more serious had happened to Natalee. With each new interview, each round of questioning, the story evolved, as if the truth was buried under layers of misdirection and denial. Investigators grew frustrated, sensing that these three young men knew more than they were saying. But unraveling their story wasn't easy. Under the glare of media attention, Joran and the Kalpoes were interrogated repeatedly, each session revealing new details but no solid answers. Their accounts began to seem like a patchwork of half-truths, making it difficult for investigators to separate fact from fiction. Adding to the challenges were the legal complexities of the Aruban justice system. Unlike in many other countries, the process in Aruba moved at a different pace. The legal system allowed for suspects to be detained and questioned for extended periods without formal charges, but it also required concrete evidence to bring those charges to court. The authorities had suspicions, they had contradictory statements, but they lacked the one thing they needed most: hard evidence. The limits of the law became a source of deep frustration for both the investigators and Natalee's family. In the United States, conflicting accounts and suspicious behavior might have been enough to take further action. But in Aruba, the process required a higher burden of proof, and without physical evidence or a confession, there was little more the police could do. Joran and the Kalpoe brothers were brought in, questioned, and released multiple times, a cycle that fed both the media frenzy and the growing frustration of those watching from afar. Joran, particularly, became the center of the investigation. As the last person seen with Natalee, his changing stories placed him under intense scrutiny. And yet, he continued to alter his account, each version seeming to move further from the truth. He was detained and released, detained again, and then, frustratingly, released once more. With every release, the public outcry grew louder, the desperation more palpable. Natalee's family, especially her mother Beth, watched in disbelief as the young man who might hold the key to her daughter's disappearance walked free. The lack of progress weighed heavily on Beth Holloway. She couldn't understand how, on such a small island, with so many people involved in the search, with the attention of the world on her daughter's case, these young men could walk in and out of police custody without any resolution. To her, it seemed clear that Joran and the Kalpos knew something, perhaps everything, about what had happened to Natalee. She was sure that their conflicting stories held the answers, but the path to those answers was blocked by the intricate requirements of the legal system. Beth took matters into her own hands. She confronted Joran, pleaded with him, hoping that perhaps a mother's grief would move him to tell the truth. But Joran remained evasive, offering reassurances, half-truths, and, ultimately, silence. Beth's heartbreak turned to determination, and her efforts only strengthened her resolve to uncover the truth, no matter how elusive it seemed. The twists in the suspect's stories, the legal challenges, and the limitations of the investigation all contributed to a growing sense of helplessness. The world watched, waiting for answers that never seemed to come. Joran's ever-changing narrative kept people guessing. Was he hiding something? Was he protecting himself, or perhaps someone else? And if he truly knew what happened to Natalee, why wouldn't he come forward with the truth? Each new twist, each altered statement, only deepened the mystery. The case was stalled, caught in a tangle of conflicting stories, legal roadblocks, and the harsh reality that, without evidence, the truth could remain forever out of reach. And so, as the investigation seemed to reach a standstill, Natalee's family and the world were left with a haunting uncertainty, clinging to the hope that somehow, someday someone would reveal what truly happened on that final night in Aruba. As the weeks turned into months, the absence of concrete answers created a void that was quickly filled with theories, speculations, and whispers. In a case with so many unanswered questions, everyone had a version of what they thought might have happened to Natalee. Friends, family, locals, and people from around the world began to piece together their own ideas, trying to solve the mystery that had left them all searching for meaning. One of the first and most prevalent theories was that Natalee had fallen victim to foul play at the hands of Joran van der Sloot and the Kalpo brothers. From the beginning, the inconsistencies in their stories cast a dark shadow over them, leading many to believe that something tragic had happened after she left Carlos and Charlie's with them. The constant changes in their accounts, the contradictions, and the evasive behavior fueled suspicions that they knew more than they were saying, that perhaps they had been involved in something they were determined to keep hidden. Rumors spread quickly, with some suggesting that the young men might have panicked after an accidental incident and decided to cover it up. Others speculated that they had taken Natalee to a secluded area where something went horribly wrong. As each new detail emerged in the media, these theories only grew stronger, evolving and expanding into a web of possibilities, each more troubling than the last. But this was just one of many possible explanations. The island setting and Natalee's disappearance without a trace led others to believe that something more organized, more sinister, might have been involved. Some suggested the possibility of human trafficking, a chilling thought that Natalee might have been taken off the island against her will, forced into an underground world where few escape. While this theory was terrifying, it wasn't without precedent. There had been cases in the Caribbean involving young women who vanished, later discovered to have been trafficked. Though there was no direct evidence linking Natalee's case to such a scenario, the theory lingered, especially in the minds of those who believed she was still alive, somewhere beyond the island. Witnesses emerged, each with their own accounts of suspicious sightings and strange events. Some locals reported seeing a woman who matched Natalee's description in various parts of the island after her disappearance, often in the company of unfamiliar men. Others claimed they saw a distressed young woman boarding a boat late that night, a boat that then disappeared into the darkness, heading away from Aruba's shores. These reports were investigated, but none could be confirmed, leaving only traces of possible sightings and more unanswered questions. Some people speculated that Natalee might have accidentally ended up in a dangerous part of the island, encountering people who were strangers to both her and Joran's group. They theorized that maybe she was separated from the young men she'd left with, and had come across individuals with darker intentions. Stories circulated about hidden pockets of crime, underground activities that tourists seldom encountered, but that occasionally came to light. Although investigators looked into these leads, no connections could be solidly established, and the stories remained just that, stories, fragments of possibilities that could neither be confirmed nor denied. As these theories multiplied, they only intensified the frustration and helplessness felt by Natalee's family and the public. With each new idea, hope would rise, only to fall again as leads dried up. For Beth Holloway and her supporters, every new theory brought both hope and pain. On one hand, it was a chance to believe that Natalee could be alive, that she might be out there waiting to be found. But on the other, it was a reminder of the vastness of the unknown, of how easily one young woman could disappear without leaving a trace. The media also played a powerful role in fueling these speculations. In an effort to keep the story in the public eye, news outlets seized on every new theory, every possible lead, and presented them with urgency. Some newspapers and channels even hired their own investigators, digging into every corner of the island, interviewing locals, and reporting on possible new angles. Each headline added another layer of complexity to the case, as journalists and audiences alike tried to piece together the puzzle of Natalee's last night. This non-stop coverage created a whirlwind of theories that sometimes overshadowed the search itself. People began to focus on the what-ifs, the possible scenarios that each person built in their mind. And while some ideas were logical, others bordered on wild speculation, with some even suggesting conspiracy theories involving powerful people covering up the truth. Friends and supporters in Mountain Brook, Alabama, heard these theories, often finding themselves torn between hope and despair as they imagined the different fates Natalee might have met. In a case like this, where real answers were scarce, rumors held power. They offered explanations, ways to make sense of the tragedy that seemed to defy understanding. For some, these theories became a form of coping, a way to keep believing that the truth would one day come to light. But for Beth and her family, each new theory felt like a road leading nowhere, each one a reminder of how elusive the truth could be. Throughout the investigation, new witnesses and informants would come forward with information, sometimes anonymously. They claimed to know something important, to have seen something that others missed. Some shared accounts of suspicious behavior by certain people after Natalee disappeared, adding to the narrative of possible foul play. But these leads often evaporated under closer examination, leading only to more dead ends and leaving the family in the same painful place, waiting, hoping, and wondering. As the mystery deepened, so did the belief that somewhere on that island, someone held the key to what happened. Someone, whether intentionally or by accident, knew the answer to the questions haunting Natalee's family and friends. But finding that person, uncovering that truth, proved to be more difficult than anyone had anticipated. These theories and speculations filled the space left by the lack of solid evidence, each one creating a new avenue for people to explore and debate. But they also left Natalee's family exhausted, torn between hope and despair. The theories represented possibilities, but they were also a reminder of how the truth continued to slip just out of reach, buried somewhere within the unanswered questions of that final night in Aruba. And as these theories grew, so did the tragedy. A young woman's life reduced to whispers, to guesses, to ideas that danced on the edge of reality but never quite brought closure. The theories might offer brief moments of hope or comfort, but they could not answer the question at the heart of it all: what really happened to Natalee Holloway? Years passed without answers, without justice for Natalee Holloway. But the name Joran van der Sloot did not fade from the public's memory. The young man who had last been seen with Natalee, whose stories and behavior had raised so many suspicions, continued to live a life shrouded in controversy and mistrust. And as time went on, Joran would prove that the suspicions surrounding him were not unfounded. In 2010, 5 years after Natalee's disappearance, Joran once again made international headlines, but this time for an entirely new crime. In Peru, another young woman, Stephany Flores, was found dead in a hotel room. The details were chilling. Joran had met Stephany in a casino and convinced her to accompany him to his hotel room. There, within hours, Stephany's life was brutally taken. Her body was discovered the next day, leading to an investigation that would soon reveal a hauntingly familiar face as the prime suspect. The murder of Stephany Flores shocked the world and brought Joran van der Sloot's name back into the spotlight, reminding everyone of Natalee's case. Here was a man who had been connected to the disappearance of a young woman in Aruba and was now the central figure in a second tragedy, another life taken too soon. For many, it felt as though this was proof of what they had always feared, that Joran was capable of violence, of deception, of hiding the darkest parts of himself behind a carefully crafted image. Peruvian authorities wasted no time. Joran was arrested, and soon after, he confessed to the murder of Stephany Flores. He described the crime in shocking detail, explaining that he had flown into a rage after discovering something on Stephany's computer. His confession was cold, detached, revealing a man who seemed to lack remorse for the life he had taken. The court sentenced him to 28 years in a Peruvian prison, a conviction that brought some sense of justice to Stephany's family but left Natalee's family with even more questions. If he had been capable of such violence, what had really happened in Aruba all those years ago? But even as he sat in prison, Joran's role in Natalee's story was far from over. While behind bars, he continued to play with the truth, using Natalee's case to manipulate, to deceive, and to maintain a twisted form of control. Over the years, he gave multiple interviews, each time offering a new version of what happened that night with Natalee. Sometimes he claimed he knew where her body was, hinting at locations, only to retract his statements when pressed. Other times, he offered bizarre, fragmented confessions, as if teasing her family with the hope of closure, only to snatch it away. Each new confession brought with it a wave of emotions for Natalee's family. Beth Holloway, desperate to find out what had happened to her daughter, watched as Joran toyed with the truth. Each interview, each statement felt like a cruel game, a way for Joran to keep control over a story that was no longer his to tell. And each time he left more questions than answers, fueling the pain that her family had carried for years. Then, in 2023, after nearly 2 decades of speculation, Joran van der Sloot was extradited to the United States on charges of extortion and wire fraud. Years earlier, he had attempted to extort Natalee's mother, offering information on her daughter's remains in exchange for money. Beth had reluctantly agreed, hoping against hope that this time, Joran would finally tell the truth. But once he received the money, he provided only lies, sending Beth down yet another path that ended in heartbreak. Now, facing American justice, Joran was forced to confront his actions in a courtroom, thousands of miles from Aruba, the place where the mystery had first begun. It was during this legal process that something unexpected happened. Joran made yet another confession, this time under oath in a court of law, and in the presence of Natalee's family. He claimed to finally reveal the truth about what happened on that night in 2005, detailing the moments that led to Natalee's disappearance. For the first time, his words were recorded, documented, a part of an official record. It was a moment that Natalee's family had waited for, a moment that should have brought peace. But even then, Joran's words were met with skepticism. His confession was chilling, yet vague, leaving gaps that only raised more questions. He described actions that suggested a sudden, violent turn, but his words lacked the remorse, the regret, the humanity that one might expect. And while his statements provided some sense of closure, the Holloway family was left wondering if this, too, was just another one of Joran's manipulations, another story designed to satisfy the court while concealing the full truth. His admission offered answers, but it could not erase the years of pain, the endless nights of wondering, and the countless dead ends that had defined their search. As Joran was led out of the courtroom, sentenced not for Natalee's disappearance but for his attempts to exploit her family, it became clear that justice for Natalee would remain elusive. Her family was left with a sense of bitter relief. Relief that the man who had haunted their lives for so long was facing punishment, yet bitterness in knowing that he had escaped accountability for the crime that had stolen their daughter from them. Joran van der Sloot's later crimes, his manipulation, his confession, and his lack of remorse all painted a picture of a man who thrived on control, on keeping others in the dark. For Natalee's family, his words were both a final chapter and a reminder of how many unanswered questions remained. They left the courtroom knowing that they might never have all the answers, that they might always be left wondering about the details of that final night. But in their hearts, they knew one thing: they had fought for Natalee with everything they had. And no matter what Joran van der Sloot might say or withhold, he could never take that away. The journey for truth, for justice, for understanding had taken them across years and continents, through heartbreak and hope. And as they walked away, they carried with them Natalee's memory, her light, and the knowledge that, no matter how dark the path, they had never stopped searching for her. This was Joran van der Sloot's legacy and the story of Natalee Holloway, a young man who, even in his confessions, kept the truth hidden in shadows, a man who left a trail of pain and questions that could never be fully answered. For the Holloway family, this story was no longer just about finding the truth. It was about honoring Natalee, carrying her legacy, and holding on to the love that had fueled their search from the beginning. And though the final answers may never come, they would forever hold on to the strength, the resilience, and the memory of a young woman who was taken too soon, but never forgotten. The story of Natalee Holloway is more than just a mystery. It is a reminder of love, strength, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. Natalee's disappearance changed lives, touched hearts around the world, and left an imprint on the communities that continue to honor her memory. But it didn't end there. Her case shaped the way the world thinks about safety, about justice, and about the enduring fight for truth. In the years since Natalee vanished, her family has fought tirelessly to bring awareness to missing persons cases. Beth Holloway, transformed by grief and loss, became an advocate for families who find themselves in the same unimaginable situation. She has worked to bring resources, support, and attention to the countless missing person cases that often go unnoticed. Through her voice, Beth has become a beacon for those who feel lost, showing families that they don't have to walk this path alone. Her advocacy, driven by the love for her daughter, has brought attention to the need for resources, better communication, and international support in cases where time and cooperation can mean the difference between hope and heartbreak. The impact of Natalee's case on media coverage of missing persons is profound. Her story captured the world's attention and brought awareness to how the media can amplify the voices of families in need, spreading information quickly and reaching people who might hold the key to solving these mysteries. Yet the media attention also highlighted the complexities and pressures faced by families in the public eye, a double-edged sword that brought help but sometimes led to false hope, misunderstandings, and painful scrutiny. Through it all, Natalee's family maintained their dignity and strength, a testament to the resilience of those who loved her. Natalee's story has also left a lasting impact on the island of Aruba and the perception of safety for young travelers. For many, her case served as a sobering reminder of the importance of caution, even in places that seem like paradise. Schools, communities, and families have become more vigilant, teaching young people about travel safety, trust, and the importance of staying connected in unfamiliar places. Natalee's disappearance raised questions and sparked conversations about safety that continue to resonate, prompting families to prepare their loved ones for the unexpected and to cherish every moment they have together. For those who knew Natalee, her legacy is deeply personal. She was more than a face in the headlines. She was a daughter, a friend, and a young woman with dreams, laughter, and a future waiting to be lived. Her friends remember the bright, hopeful girl who brought joy to their lives, and her family remembers the daughter who filled their home with love. Natalee's story is a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of treasuring every moment. Her memory lives on in the hearts of those who knew her best, the people who continue to celebrate her life, even as they mourn her loss. And as the years go by, the world still remembers. The case of Natalee Holloway has become a symbol, a story that doesn't fade but instead remains as a call to action, a call for empathy, understanding, and justice. The mystery may never fully be solved, and the questions may remain, but her legacy endures as a reminder of the power of love, the strength of family, and the pursuit of truth, no matter how difficult the path. Today, Natalee's memory is honored in ways that reflect her spirit. Her name is remembered not only as part of a tragic story, but as part of a movement for change, for hope, and for helping others find peace. Her life, though cut short, continues to inspire a world that never knew her but that mourns her loss just the same. Through her family's resilience, through the ongoing work to prevent other tragedies, and through the shared commitment to find answers for all missing loved ones, Natalee's legacy shines bright. This is her impact, her story, her legacy. Natalee Holloway may be gone, but her memory lives on, held by a family who never gave up, by friends who keep her spirit alive, and by a world that has not forgotten the girl who went to celebrate life and left a legacy of love, strength, and the unyielding search for justice. Natalee Holloway's story is one that touches all of us. It's a story that reminds us to stay vigilant, to look out for one another, and to appreciate every moment with the people we love. If Natalee's story has resonated with you, remember her legacy by being mindful of your own safety and the safety of others, especially when traveling. Talk to your friends, your family, and the young people in your life about the importance of staying connected and looking out for each other. Today, there are countless families still searching for their loved ones, still hoping for answers, and still fighting for justice. You can make a difference by learning more about missing persons advocacy, supporting organizations that help families in crisis, and spreading awareness. The power of a community coming together cannot be underestimated. When we work together, share information, and offer support, we can help prevent future tragedies. If you'd like to stay connected and be part of a community that brings stories like Natalee's to light, please consider subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, You'll stay updated on stories that need to be told, stories that deserve attention, and stories that remind us of the resilience of the human spirit. Here we honor the memories of those who are missing, support their families, and keep hope alive. So, join us. Help us share these stories, raise awareness, and be part of a community that stands for justice, compassion, and the power of remembrance. And as we remember Natalee Holloway, let us carry forward the strength of her family, the love they continue to show, and the unwavering hope that keeps her story alive. Thank you for watching, for remembering, and for being part of this journey. And once again, don't forget to subscribe so together we can continue to share these stories and bring hope to those who need it most.